You are watching Trinity Channel.
Good evening and welcome to the show. I just want to thank you for being with us. I am your host, Pastor Jason Bland, and it is an honor and privilege to be with you tonight. For those of you who are joining us live, welcome. For those of you that are watching the replay, we are so glad you are here with us. I just want to take a moment and thank all of you who give to ABN and the Trinity Channel and support it. I'm so thankful for you guys. It's such a blessing to be in and out of the office at times and to see the gifts that come in, the blessings that you pour out on this ministry, and Pastor and Dr. Bossum for his heart and desire to start this ministry so many years ago, and how it's evolved and how it's continued to grow, and we're just continuing to move forward. I'm so thankful for it, so thankful for you, and I just want you to know tonight, as you are joining us, we have two awesome guests with us tonight who are going to talk through some very tough issues. But I want you to know, if you have questions that you might like answered and they're pertaining to our topic, please feel free to comment, and we will do our best to answer those tonight. But tonight we are going to jump in, and we're the topic of tonight's discussion is shining light on the unseen darkness of child sex trafficking in the U.S. This has been an ongoing thing. It gets swept under the rug so often, and other things get brought to light. There are certainly important topics in the United States and in the world around us, but this is one that needs to be brought to light even more. This is something that God has been poking and prodding at me for months to do, and I've been kind of fighting it, and I can't fight it anymore. You know, my heart just truly breaks for what is happening here in the U.S. in the sex trafficking, the trafficking that's taking place, and how it's getting swept under the rug, and things are getting slighted in California and Hollywood, and there's just so much that needs to be exposed. And I truly believe that we're living in a time where, we're definitely closer to the end of times than we were yesterday. And some of what we're seeing, the sickness, the filth and disgust of people, is certainly bringing us toward those end times and biblical times, and what we read in the Bible of end times. And so tonight we're going to jump in and talk to, like I said, two great guests about this topic. And I'm going to bring them both in. We have Naren and Brother Bashar. They are joining us tonight. Thank you both for being with us. I'm so excited to have both of you here. When I talked to the gal at the office about setting this up, I gave her several names, and I gave her three names, and you two were on there, and you two responded first, and so I was so excited. And Naren, we are just so blessed to have you as a human rights activist here with us tonight. Brother Bashar, I know your heart behind this, and so I want to hear from both of you kind of what was it that brought this about for you to be something that you want to tackle and go after, and why is it so important? And just kind of share your heart. Naren, we'll start with you, and then Brother Bashar, just kind of share, like, okay, what brought this to light for you in your life, and why are you so passionate about this topic?
Thank you so much. Glad to be with both of you. Thank you, Pastor Jason. Thank you for the Trinity channel. This is a very dear topic to me, as a woman, as a mother, as a daughter, as a sister, as an American. I think that this should be a dear topic for everyone because this has affected our country in whole for many, many years. And, it's slowly coming to the light, and it should have been in the spotlight from day one. For a very long time, people thought it was just a conspiracy or that it was exaggerated until it started happening right in their backyards, right in our communities, affecting, many citizens in our country. And that is when we need to put our foot down. And, as a new mother, and even prior to that, just seeing our young girls get violated in the worst ways possible. And, so many people stood silent and didn't want to tackle the issue. And I think that really the silent group are as guilty as the actual traffickers if we don't do anything about it. So there's a lot of people who need our help, and they're crying out for help in a very indirect ways and direct ways, and we have to help them. We have to unite our forces together to help them to hopefully, decrease this to a degree where it's not going to be one of the top 10 issues in our country.
Absolutely. Thank you, Narendra.
Thank you.
Brother Bashar.
Yeah, I definitely echo the same sentiments from Nahrain. It is something that's been long ignored. And yeah, right. I mean, it's been pushed to the edges of conspiracy theories instead of, being seriously handled. But also, I think it's imperative on the Christian to take this seriously. I mean, here we stand vehemently against abortion and the murder in the womb, and yet it seems like outside the womb we kind of are quiet. So I think this is just as sensitive topic as abortion, is that we need to call out wickedness for what it is. And this is just way too pervasive in society. And it's sad that, again, it's sad that it had to take this long, but we praise God that, better late than never. However, we need to hear the cries of the suffering and the poor and the people who are going through it. So I got the text earlier this week about, this topic in the show, and I was adamant about being on it because this is such an important issue, and I'm so grateful that Trinity Channel and ABN wants to be a part of this discussion and able to inform people about what we're going to talk about, so people can really pray about this, stay vigilant, and realize that this needs to be tackled at a community level, at a local level, and a statewide level, and then hopefully eventually on a national level. So we got to start. We got to start somewhere. So I'm grateful to be a part of this conversation. So thank you.
Awesome, Brother Bashar. Thank you. Yeah, I mentioned to our two guests a little bit about how I heard about this, and I began to get involved with it when a truck stop was coming into the area that I lived in, and then being involved in the city, then I looked at some of the stats and statistics of what kind of demeanor, what kind of people were going to come along with a truck stop. And I don't want to categorize anyone by any means, but there was certainly a heaviness as I looked at the amount of truck stops that are used for trafficking spots. And then I remember early on in Detroit when the Super Bowl was here, and hearing about how those cities and times when the Super Bowl takes place are big trafficking sites. So heard about this, then a Christian band that I got connected with and had some conversations with. Several of them got involved overseas with this, and just it really sparked some interest in having some conversations with local and state law enforcement, and hearing these stories. It really broke my heart as an individual. And like you said, we take a stand on so many other things in this country, but yet this one we do not. We stand for women who have been sexually abused and they want to abort their children, and we allow that to take place, but we don't stand for the children that are lost. We don't stand for the black and white pictures in Walmart. In the 70s and 80s, they were on milk cartons. Now they're on the, they're out there on. I noticed most recently Speedway had them scrolling at a gas station. These lost children, and it just breaks my heart to think, were they a victim of slavery? Are they a victim of this? And we are living in a sick world, and it saddens me to hear quote unquote professors out of places like Yale and Harvard University trying and striving to justify what these men and women are doing as a disease, that the reason they are taking these children and the reason that they are doing what they're doing is because of it's something. It's truly sin. When we boil it down, it is sin, and it needs to be brought to light. And I am truly thankful for the steps that our current government has began to take to bring this to light, to expose it. I think it's going to take much more than what's current, and it's going to hopefully we have a good solid foundation over the next several years in government to continue to expose it. But it is something that needs to be brought to light. And if you have children of your own, if you've had children of your own and you're not passionate about this, you should be. Dig into it, find out. Like you said, they've boiled it down to conspiracy theories, but there is so much, and we're seeing so much more. Children being abducted, and hearing the stories of 5- and 6-year-old kids being prostituted out, and it just breaks my heart. One of the questions that I get, and Naren, I want to ask you this, is, one of the things we try to do is try to figure out, okay, what do we look for? And so what type of signs should people look for when they're trying to spot victims of sex trafficking? Because it might not be a typical thing, but that's certainly one of the things that I've been asking in recent months. And like, how do we spot this? What are some things that we should look for as we're just living life from day to day?
Absolutely, Pastor Jason. That's a great question. There's different signs that people can look for as far as the victims, as far as spotting the traffickers. For example, with the victims, many times they have very poor, low self-confidence. They're very malnourished. Just because they're not given the proper meals, the health care, they're living in very, very poor, housings. Living conditions are terrible. They may show physical signs of abuse as far as bruisings, cuttings, different, physical abuses such as those. And they may, not share where they work. They may not share where they live. And if you're lucky, if you find out where they live, many times the compound or the home that they are living in is actually the physical place that they are being abused at, as along with many other victims. And, many times they'll look to someone before they answer your question, if there is another person present. A lot of times that is one of the ringleaders or one of the sex traffickers that oversees the women. They normally have a certain amount of women that they have to oversee and monitor to make sure that they are not speaking out and that they're not crying out to anyone. These victims also, they may also be, not dressed properly because they're being forced to try to attract that type of attention, to forcefully sell their bodies. Many times too, they're not even 100% mentally because they are drugged. And this is just, a very, very heart-wrenching situation to see these women who are being drugged daily, hourly, every few hours they are drugged just to, they're treated like machines, just so they can actually perform the way that these sex uh, traffickers, ringleaders want them to compound that they are stationed in, then they are actually also abused by the ringleaders or the sex traffickers for speaking out or giving any type of evidence or information that they may be at a a compound that is harboring victims. And for as far as the traffickers, what people can look for is if they are in a in a plaza or a market.
Looks like Naren is cutting out a little bit. We'll get her back in just in a moment. One of the things, Brother Bashar, that I just want to bring people to light in this is, as Naren mentioned, there is not a specific type of person to look for per se. It's not necessarily someone of certain color or skin or ethnicity, but sex trafficking affects everyone from upper class to lower class, all ages, men, women, children alike. It looks like we have Naren back. I'm going to allow her to continue on with what she was sharing. Naren, I was just sharing that, the one challenge with this is it doesn't, sex trafficking doesn't just affect a certain ethnicity or an age group. It doesn't segregate people. It affects everyone across the board.
Absolutely.
So many of the things that you mentioned are certainly things to be aware of. As you mentioned, the looking, if children look to an adult, if women look to a man before they answer questions, there are just some signs that we certainly need to be aware of. And I don't think, one of the things that I struggled with in life is sometimes I've had some of these moments and thought, should I call or not? And you're always better to play it safe than sorry. You're always better to play it safe if you see something that just seems out of place, especially if you're someone who's of faith and God. For me, God blessed me with the gift of discernment. That's one of those gifts that it's bittersweet. I love it, but I also don't like it because sometimes I can tell a person before I even meet them if they're good or bad. And I certainly am careful with that. But as God's given me that, I realize that that's a gift. And there have been times where I have called on issues and they have been successful in tracking people down. And there have been times where I've been off a little bit. But I just don't think we can be overly cautious in this. I want you to go ahead and continue to share, just in those things to look for. So go ahead, Naren.
Absolutely. Thank you, Pastor Jason. And, just following up, if you're suspicious, as Pastor Jason had mentioned, if you have that gut feeling that something is off with this young lady or this child, it never hurts just to follow up with the feds, with the police, or send a text, call the hotline and just give them information. That child or that woman might very well be on the missing list. And, these victims are, you will definitely, there will be a sign, there will be a cue that will alert you, because they are not, they're not in a perfect condition. They're physically not in a in a presentable way that you would see a normal citizen roaming around the streets. They're very scared of people who actually oversee them and monitor them. And the traffickers I was mentioning to also look for are, for example, if you see a group of men or several men in a parking lot, and they're just kind of creeping around and staring or scoping the area for young girls. If you see them, like a young girl walking door on your vehicle, look at them, make sure you let them know that that you're seeing them if you feel that the crime is about to take place and you're about to witness it, so that hopefully it will stop it. But don't interfere in a way where you're coming out of your vehicle to also endanger yourself. But if you do see this and you see them, there's a difference between maybe a group of young fellas that are just attracted to a young girl, or you just have this bad feeling, this gut feeling that these men are just up to no good. And even as a woman yourself, if you're coming out of a market this can happen in broad daylight, and if you feel uncomfortable, if there's a vehicle just creeping around your vehicle and it's tinted, or you see visually that you see these gentlemen in the vehicle and they're sitting in their car and they're just staying there, that's a pretty good sign. I would walk back in. It never hurts to ask the store manager or someone in there, please help me walk to my vehicle. I feel unsafe. Never take that risk. Always be cautious of your surroundings. But definitely, that you can definitely spot a trafficker if, they're sitting, in a parking lot. A lot of times it does happen in a store or retail parking lots. It happens a lot in retail parking lots. I receive so many complaints about parking lots, not only in Michigan, throughout the country, in all 50 states. And Pastor Jason, just to throw some numbers out there, there are 2.4 million victims of sex trafficking in the world. There are 17,500 victims of sex trafficking who are brought into the United States a year. And also, the more than this is 150 traffickers are using to take advantage of our young girls, and actually, the Michigan is really high up there, and we'll talk a little further stats.
Momentarily. It's staggering, Brother Bashar, to hear these statistics. 2.4 million, 17.5, 17,500 are brought into the U.S. And again, I understand. I don't want to sound harsh here. I understand that there are other rights right now. I understand what's going on in Wisconsin, and again, there's been another incident where some officers have killed a black man, and I know that certainly all lives matter. And by saying that, I probably just singled myself out to somebody, and they're going to get upset with me, But the fact of the matter is, there is such a huge cover up of this. There are those that have been tied to former politicians that have been involved in this, and what we see, and when we get Naren back, I think we'll talk a little bit about it. Is we see that it is the wealthy that are able to afford and buy these children and use them for their purposes, and it truly is a sick and disgusting thing. So, that's why I asked the question, what should we look for? It is not, it is, what we see in those that are victims is, yes, we see the malnourishment, we see them looking to others, but the ones who are buying these children to perform these acts on them, to take them into these slave rings, are men of power and men and women who have money. And it truly is sad. It truly is sickening. Brother Bashar, do you have anything that you want to add to what Naren had shared and what we're saying, what we're talking about here?
Yeah, absolutely, about how serious this is in America. So I remember she shared statistics on 2.4 million. When I was researching it, I got 1.2 million are trafficked globally. But again, that these are all just conservative numbers. We don't really know how many in the millions are being trafficked, because we're only recording the ones we can at least track or have an understanding for. So I mean, it could be in the hundreds of millions. We wouldn't know. So, and it says on average, 280,000 are trafficked in the U.S. So let's just take that conservative, 1.2 or the 2.4, right? Either way, you have America making up at least 12 to 23% of the children trafficked. So of the trafficking victims, America is a sizable portion, and we're not the biggest country of all. We still have India and China that has sizable portions above us. So the fact that we contribute so much to this evil is sickening, but it's also enlightening as to what you said, Pastor Jason, is that we have to be honest. It is the rich people that are doing this, that are promoting this, that are continuing this, and the fact that they can get away with this evil desire is even more sickening, because it's at the expense of poorer and minority communities. And I do agree with what you said, that everyone's a victim, from the top to the bottom. But we do know it affects minorities negatively more, and again, with what you're saying about injustices, of course, we should never side of one injustice to call out another. But we should always be calling out injustices for what they are. So with the Wisconsin thing, of course that was injustice, but with this needs to be continually battered in to people's heads to let them understand what's going on. In addition to what Nahrain said, so not only are these people in parking lots waiting for women or children to snag, they're in hotel rooms snagging children. But with the parking lot situation, there's been multiple times I saw on news channels as to how to prevent yourself being trafficked. And these traffickers are getting more and more lucrative and creative with how they traffic. So what they'll do, they'll put things on your car, they'll put zip ties, they'll do anything to get your attention for a second away from noticing your surrounding, so that you pick up something, you clip something off, you're checking something, and then boom, they're right there and they snag you, and all of a sudden you're out of the scene and God knows where you're at. So you have that problem. In addition to, the biggest problem is when you have the sex trade that exists in like these poorer communities in the inner cities. We don't look at them as trafficking situations, because we say, okay, it's just prostitution, they're selling their services, this and that. That's not the case. These are pimps abusing women and drugging them up and throwing them in a trade. So absolutely, it's still trafficking one way or another, whether you call it prostitution or that, it's still trafficking. And even though these women are consenting to a certain extent, of course, I'm sure if given otherwise, they wouldn't do it. But since they're consenting, it seems like, oh, well, they're not being trafficked, they're offering services. That's a bunch of garbage. These women in inner cities who are in prostitution are, yes, they're still being trafficked, whether they want to call it that or not. And these kids who are sold to older men because their mom and their father and their parents have addictions that they need to feed. So they'll sell their children so that they get their drugs. This happens. This is not an uncommon thing to find in inner cities where people are, strung on drugs, and these issues happen. So I think the biggest issue with this trafficking problem is one thing you touched on, Pastor Jason, is this cover up. Is that there's ways to soften the blow. It's ways to make it seem like it's not such a big issue, right? So, and I think it needs to stop. We need to call it out for what it is, and expose it, and be, the children of light that we are, to show people how dark the world is and what Jesus can offer in solution. So it's I'm happy again that we're talking about this, and I know we're gonna really get deep in a minute. So I'll pass it on over.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you both, Naren and Brother Bashar, and we are going to push on into this a little bit more. But it is one of those things. Like for those of you listening, and maybe this is the first time you're hearing about this and this level, and you've been skeptical. I don't know. Where I grew up in the inner city, and I've always been skeptical of everything. I never trust anybody, and that's not always a good thing. But I've always been, I always challenge my boys. They're always asking me, even my wife, like, why are you looking around? Why are you checking? We always need to be aware of our surroundings. One of the things my dad taught me is always know your way in and always know your way out.
Mm-hmm.
Brother Bashar, you mentioned something, and this happened just a week ago at Walmart. Somebody put a flyer on my window. I was with my boys. I got in the car. They're like, Dad, there's a flyer on the window. I said, get in the car. Let's go. And I drove off, and they said, why did you just drive off? I said, because that can be something to distract me from some people who are not good people. And, I just kind of left it at that with them. And it just ended up being something that wasn't very big, but who knows? It's those little things. We always have to be watching. It doesn't matter what community we live in or where we live. It can affect us and impact us anywhere.
Yes.
Whether we live in, now certainly we do see it, as you said, more in inner cities. We see that kind of thing happen. And it is saddening because you know what? A lot of these women, and I had an opportunity. My very first mission trip was to Toronto, Canada, and we went to an area of Toronto at night to feed homeless. And the things that I saw there broke my heart. The women that were there and the way that they were dressed, I knew that something wasn't right. And when we got back, the pastor that took us out, he shared with us, these women are on drugs, and they are being given drugs. They are being trafficked to sell their bodies to get the fix that they need. And, it just truly broke my heart to see this happening. And be brought to light in it, like, wow, this is such a bigger thing than I realized. And growing up in the Metro Detroit area, I knew what prostitution was. I was aware of it. I had been in the city, in and out of the city with my dad didn't, my parents didn't hide me from that stuff. They made me aware of it. So it's always been an issue, but it seems that it's continuing to grow because of the problems. And this is certainly for another topic, but pornography is a huge issue. It's a multi-billion dollar industry, but yet no one will take it down. People praise Hugh Hefner for the things that he did and praise him for having Playboy and all of this, but it is a beginning for some of these men and women that lead them to these depths of sin, because it no longer is just images. They need something deeper. They need to go to the next level. And so there are so many levels that need to be destroyed here. But it seems like money gets in the way, because if we shut down the industry of pornography and you shut that $1 billion industry down, people are going to lose money. And so that's why we entitled this Shining the Light on an Unseen Darkness. There are many unseen darknesses here in America where money plays a factor. Not just America. Naren, I want to ask you, what has been one of the maybe one of the worst international sex slavery cases that you have been knowledgeable of in say the last 10 years that you know and are aware of?
Yes, Pastor Jason. So the last case in the last 10 years that really made headlines all over the country, all over the world, was the situation in Iraq where ISIS invaded into the Nineveh Plains and in Syria and also in the Sinjar area, targeting Christians, targeting Yazidis. Assyrian Christians and Yazidis were the biggest victims. Just in one shot, 400 women and young children were taken by ISIS, and some of them were sold for as little as a pack of cigarettes. So it didn't even make that average price in the world for a sex slave. The most average price recorded is about $90. In Iraq, with my people there, they were being sold for a pack of cigarettes. And the youngest one sold was about 6 years old. So this was, entire towns were attacked, entire cities, villages, and women were being loaded in truckloads, in big semis, in big pickup trucks, and they were being taken away from their families. And a lot of the men were actually murdered. They were killed just so that they can take the women. And some of them committed suicide because, the crimes were so horrendous and they were being sold over and over and over. They actually had a menu for all the different age groups. And that's how we found out the youngest one was 6 years old. And later on, we had found evidence of her pictures and weddings taking place to terrorists, to men who were supporting this sex slavery in Iraq and Syria, and actually was being harbored by many other surrounding countries. And so this was a very dear topic to my heart because it affected our own community, my own people, family members. This was just insanity, and the whole world stood silent, Pastor Jason. And they didn't interfere as women were being sold, some of them over 100 times in just a matter of a few years, being sold over 100 times. And keep in mind also, these women, because of our culture, they were virgins. They were virgins and being violated not once, not twice, hundreds of times over and over by these criminals, these savages, and young girls, and some of them who were lucky enough to run away, came back pregnant by these ISIS terrorists. And, I get emotional talking about it because I've spoken to some of these women and, they were just traumatized. And I'm not even sure if any type of psychological therapy can ever fix the trauma that they have endured. Here in the United States, we are also facing sex trafficking, but what happened to our community in Iraq is just so horrendous that I believe that, every human rights activist, every global leader needs to stand up and truly put an end to the abuse of young girls and our women by these savages who stood behind a ISIS terrorist flag.
Absolutely. It is so heartbreaking. Naren, you said a pack of cigarettes. A pack of cigarettes.
Mm-hmm.
$5 to $9.
And these men were scum. They were scum. Pastor Jason, if you saw some of them, they didn't even have teeth. And they were horrible. And they were getting paid $100,000, and those crimes. This is how it becomes a $150 billion industry, the sex trafficking. And it all didn't happen by coincidence. A lot of it was premeditated, pre-planned, to target the most vulnerable, as Brother, Jason mentioned as well, or Brother Shukri, I'm sorry, mentioned that they do target the vulnerable, the minorities. We were the majority at one point. They made us a minority because of crimes like this. Genocide is a huge contributor also to sex trafficking, because a lot of times sex trafficking also happens with genocide.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is truly, and you mentioned another thing, and I've heard this before, but just these people are wicked. They have menus for people to pick from, what they want, who they want. You have men and women choosing to pay to be with a certain kind of individual, to take care of a quote unquote sexual desire that they have, and they are paying for this. Sometimes a pack of cigarettes or $90 or whatever the case may be. It is, and here, what is so disturbing, like I said, to me, is to hear individuals who have PhDs at well-known universities standing up and saying that these men and these women, they have a sickness, so we need to relax on this. We need to give them the benefit of the doubt. What is wrong with our world? You mentioned it, Naren. Activists need to stand up. We need to hear more about this. We need to stop worrying about how many points this political person has and how many points they have and this and that, and let's stop worrying about how many people hate Trump versus who love Joe Biden. Let's focus on this problem that we have and solve this solution. Let's work together. We have men and women, we have children right now who have been abducted across America tonight from a local convenience store, grocery store, retail store, and yet we are silent. We're more worried about what's going on in government than we are in our own backyard. And it is disturbing. It is so disturbing that there's such this cover up. I want to bring it back home, Naren and Brother Bashar, and just talk a little bit about some of the states here. And we did get a question here. Houston Webb says, is there an area in the U.S. where there are more situations than others? I am blind, so I do not know a lot about this. I think that leads us into those questions. That question, a good topic of question of what are some of the high areas, the top states in the U.S. And we'll start with Naren there, where we see sex trafficking. Why do you think these states, especially like the top 5, made that? And what are some other states on that list? And we'll kind of start there and go from there with it.
Absolutely. So the state for the highest number of cases is actually California. California has 1,500 cases a year. As far as per capita, it's definitely Nevada. Nevada has the highest, 7.6 per 100. So that's pretty high per capita. But California having the highest number of cases for having such a large population, to follow with Texas, also Florida and New York, and Texas having 1,000 cases a year. But imagine, this just resets 1,000 cases a year, 1,500 a year. Every year there are, and these are just documented. As Brother Bashar mentioned, this is just the ones they're being documented. There are so many others that are happening that are not properly vetted, are not properly documented as sex slavery or sex trafficking. In a lot of these states, that's a great question. A lot of these states, they have a large traveling cases, a lot of international travelers, and also they're either near an international border or they have an international border. So like Texas, California, Michigan, Mexico, Canada. So there's, a lot of, and this is why, it's very important for our very protection, our very national security, is to have border control. And that's not to keep, just immigrants or illegal immigrants out. We want immigrants. That's not the issue. The bigger issue is sex traffickers, criminals that are using our borders to bring in girls, to take out girls, and they're very, very professional in what they do. They are very under the radar, and they know our system. And just to give you an example, just in 2015, under the previous president, Michigan was number 2 for worst sex trafficking in the entire country. In 2015, we were number 2. Just in the last statistics in 2019, we became number 10. And this is why it is important to have border control. It doesn't matter whether someone's on the left or the right, if they're Republican or Democrat. This is about our security. This is about our young girls, protecting our young girls. It shouldn't be, does that party, are they against border control? Are they for it? That means I'm going to be against it. No. Border control is to eliminate not only sex traffickers, but there's a lot of illegal smuggling of weapons, a lot of, illegal drugs. There's just, it's all connected together, Pastor Jason. So these international borders with these states that are having the highest number of cases a year, it is very important to truly, truly monitor these borders so tightly and really know who's coming in, who's coming out. And, a lot of the border control, the patrolling, are actually trained to spot these sex traffickers. So they're trained for this. And if we don't have enough of them, then how are we going to catch these sex traffickers that are literally these families that are complaining they have young girls who just disappeared, they never saw them again, and sure enough, a lot of them are making it out of the country, and and some of them are still in the country. We can't even find them in our own country, but let alone once they make it out of that border, then there's even a lesser chance of them to ever get reunited with their girls again. How devastating.
Absolutely. It is just, Houston, you asked, and I think you're watching. It is certainly something to inform yourself about. Naren, one of the things I remember from about 6 years ago or so, I remember just diving in and hearing about, there's this area in Arizona where it's kind of, there's a part of the territory we've kind of relinquished back to Mexico. It's still American territory, but we don't go there. And there's a lot of trafficking that takes place in that area, just south of Phoenix, Arizona. It is so important. And again, it's not about whether they have a D or an R on the end of their name. And I get, there are so many people fighting against having a wall for Border Patrol, but it is things like this that are taking place. It's these dead zones, these places that you don't go, that Americans forget about, that we just kind of leave out there, that this stuff is taking place, that girls in states like California, Nevada, Michigan, Florida, New York, everywhere, they're being trafficked to those areas, sold off, taken to Mexico. Powerful men in America are flying to Mexico to buy them, bring them back here, and use them at their disposal. And as you said, these cases that are being reported, we might get this in 1,500 in California. That's not a big deal. These are the reported cases. These are not the incidences. I've had conversations with individuals. These are not the instances where families, because they have addictions to drugs and so forth, they allow their children to go and be trafficked out on weekends. And maybe this is the first you're hearing of this and you're thinking, yeah, right. But there are families here in America, men and women, grown men and women, who traffic their children out on the weekend to take care of a drug addiction, to get money that they need to do what it is that they need to do. And we don't even know about those ones. So there are many. I believe that this is a conservative number that we hear, truly a conservative number, because of a sickness that we have here in America and beyond and internationally. It is so widespread. And I just don't get why we keep sweeping it under the rug, why we just kind of brush it off and let it go until it hits home, and then it hits in our own neighborhood and we begin to go, whoa, what is this? You know, we need to be culturally aware. As our young millennials say, we need to be woke. We need to be aware of what's going on. So that's why I felt it's so important to talk about this, to share this. Here in Michigan, we have taken some steps to have border patrol. And it's not to keep people out. It's to keep out those that don't need to be here and allow the ones that need to be here, because we are close to the Canadian border. And as I shared with Brother Bashar, Loren, as you were out for a few moments, I was in Toronto in the early 2000s and had opportunity to do ministry there. And the trafficking that was taking place in the Toronto area just blew me away, really broke my heart, for just seeing these young men being trafficked out there in the Toronto area. And so it is such a huge problem.
And Pastor Jason, for California to have so many cases a year, that's where Hollywood is. Where I'm wanting to know, where are all these celebrities that get so involved in politics, that get so involved in other topics, for having such a huge topic of children being sold, of women being sold? I would like to know where all of them are. That is something that they should all, because people, young girls will look up to them. And if they say, you know what, you should carry a pepper spray, or, you shouldn't be texting on your phone when you're walking out of a shop, just pay attention to your surroundings. There are simple things that they can do, such as these, like rappers, singers, celebrities, actors, get involved, but they're nowhere to be found because they don't care about our society. Or if they don't, maybe they should start to.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not one to point fingers, because my mom taught me when you point one finger, you're pointing three at yourself. But you're absolutely right. It does raise questions. And I know that any of you that are watching, you've seen it. There are conspiracy theories out there. But I also think there's truth to this. Why is Hollywood being silent? Why are they not standing against this? They stand against other things. They stand against, let's just be honest, they stand against the Republican way. They stand against those who are in office currently, but they won't take a stand against this. It does make you question. It does make you wonder, where are their values? Where are their priorities? What is their focus? And the ones that do stand up against it, here's the thing. The ones that do stand up against it, they are rid from Hollywood culture. They are cut out of being in movies. They are cut out of this. And so here's the thing. Here's the thing that I want people to know. And I remember this from 2 months ago. My son had a fifth grade graduation, and his principal said, go out there and be the change that you want your world to see and be. I was told the same thing in fifth grade. And now I'm standing up and asking Hollywood, where are you? Why are you so silent? And I'm being told to shut up. And I know that that's not politically correct language, whatever, but I'm told to be quiet and just go with the flow, to just follow the flock. That is not okay. And I don't stand for that. And we deserve to have answers. We deserve to know why. Why are they willing to stand up for certain things but not this? Answer the questions. Okay, if it's just a conspiracy theory, then come out and prove that those conspiracy theories are wrong. If someone called me out on something, I would stand up and prove them. If I wasn't in the wrong, I would stand up and say, this is why I'm not wrong. I would show them that I'm not wrong. But we are not seeing that in places like Hollywood, in California. And so what else are we to believe? Why are they not? Why are they not taking a stand against it? Brother Bashar, you look like you got something you want to say, so go for it, man.
Yeah, no, Pastor Jason, it is such a hard topic to talk about because just emotionally, you get upset, you get angry, and it's hard to keep a level head, So, it's simple. The reason why nobody will talk about, especially in the elites and the higher politicians and these actors, is either they're a part of the system or they're complicit in their silence. So I'm not ashamed to say it. Call me a conspiracy theorist, but even when the Harvey Weinstein revelations were coming out, even when that one actor was exposing the pedophiles and the all the producers in the in Hollywood, people say whatever they want to say. They can say, well, no, we love our actors, we love our producers. Even when the Roman Polanski thing came out, everyone wants to just defend these people who are just who are sick, who don't care about our society, and want to teach us about morals, and yet they have nothing to say about how children are being treated, how child actors are being treated, how females are being treated in Hollywood. I have no time to hear it. I have no time for people who want to lecture us but don't want themselves to be judged on the same accountability standard. So, in addition to that, I think, and it's tough to even say this, Pastor Jason, but the reason why we have such a problem with this trafficking, because it's so pervasive in America. So I think it's estimated that I think 400 to 800,000 children go missing every year in America. Now, statistically, they say about 3/4 to 80% are found and recovered, which is great, praise God. But we still have to account for the 20 to 25% that don't come back. Were they trafficked? What happened to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to piggyback off Nahrain, when I found out Michigan was in the top 10, it really broke me, because it's like, if we all, how did we let Michigan become part of the top 10? We are at fault. People are like, well, it happens under our noses. No, we're at fault. We should have been more vigilant. We should care more about children to try to stop this. Instead, we're so busy with our lives, so busy, consumed with our time, consumed with our phone. Michiganders let this happen. We've let this trafficking issue to pervade in our society. And the other conversation people really don't want to have about this is, it's so pervasive. We've had cases of child protective services, people in CPS who accordingly are trying to correct bad parents, but have been caught taking kids and trafficking them. So here's an organization that's by the government that's supposed to protect children, trafficking them. Now, we don't know how much, so I'm not going to say they're all corrupt, but you have orphanages and group homes that children get trafficked through. People come in, say, I'll adopt them or I'll do this, traffic them. Then you have religious organizations and like UNICEF and these international organizations, and you have these religious organizations who are also complicit. So, we can blame the elites all day long, but when we realize it's also happening on a local level, we ought to realize we've let this evil, wicked deed get its tentacles far-reaching into all areas of society. So anywhere children are, you will find traffickers, you will find pedophiles, you will find people who are going to abuse them, because we haven't done the due diligence to seek this out and to get them out. So another conversation that people don't want to have is, you have different types of, pedophiles. So you have ones that are the wolves, right? That are pervading, that are wicked, that need the capital punishment. However you want to say it or not, they just need to be eliminated. Then you have pedophiles who were abused as children, and then they continue the cycle of abuse because they don't know any better.
Right.
And then you have ones that, just like you said, Pastor Jason, who started with pornography, who started with a little bit of sin, started growing up in their darkness, and then entertain things like child pornography. So there are sections of people that can be helped and can be brought back to the light, and Jesus can, save them. But there are people that just need to be stopped. And it's not incumbent on us to figure out who's who. We need to stop all this. And thank God for this channel. Thank God for this opportunity to bring this to light. And it just reminds me of Ephesians 5. I don't want to take up too much time because I know there's still so much to go over. So Ephesians 5 says, 5:11, and have no fellowship with unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them. For it is shameful even to speak of those things which are done by them in secret. But all things that are exposed are made manifest by the light, for whatever makes manifest is light. Therefore he says, awake you who sleep, arise from the dead, and Christ will give you light. And it's incumbent on Christians especially to shine this light. And I think what Paul says, it's shameful to even speak. Really, to speak these things out, it brings horrific images. It brings tears and anger in our heart to think this goes on under our noses. But praise God, he's using this channel and using level-headed people like us to speak out on these things without being outraged and without being physically disturbed by what we know. So I just praise God, and I'm just so glad that there are people who want to speak out and are not scared to.
Yeah, Brother Bashar, you mentioned some things, and here's the thing, as someone who is a person of faith and reads God's word for what it is, what we're seeing today is nothing new. We were seeing it then.
Yep.
Places like Sodom and Gomorrah, and God destroyed them because of the wickedness, because of the men sleeping with men and the evil that was taking place, and we're always going to have sin. And, I kind of want to dive a little bit in on this. And, so one of the things that I'm asked as I step out on this and as I share my passion with people is, what does the church do? How can the church stand in the gap? How can the church bring forth, and I say, the thing that I say is it starts with us. It starts with men.
Yes.
Because there are many men who have or have had problems with some sort of level of pornography or something of that nature. And it is tough, and it can be deep, and it starts with us men getting our lives in order and in a way that we align with God. It starts there. It starts having men of integrity in your church and in your community. And because here's the thing that I see with so many people is sin. It's an old song. Sin will take you farther than you want to go. It will keep you there longer than you want to stay. And I think that one of the reasons that churches don't get active is because we're afraid of our own sins being exposed as we try to tackle something like this. And so we have to know that we're not perfect people. We do have sins in our lives. And, church, I think the thing that you can do is, again, it starts with you and your heart. You purify and cleanse your heart with the Lord and get it right. And, no, you're not going to be perfect. As I sit here and talk to you tonight, I am not perfect. I am a human man. I put my pants on one leg at a time, socks on one foot at a time. I have imperfections in my life, but I know that this area of sin is huge and we need to stand against it. We need to take a stand. We need to move forward. We need to address the issue that is before us. And it starts, we can't change the world in one day. Rome wasn't built in a day, but it starts with us. It starts here and now. And that's what we have to do, is we have to act. And we have to remember that your past does not determine your future. The sins of your past don't have to determine your future. And so many of us get caught in the guilt and the shame. And there are men and women, and maybe there are men and women who are going to see this not today live right now as we're watching it, but you're seeing it in the future, and you've been a part of this. You've been abused. You've been a part of sex trafficking. You've been hurt. Reach out and get that help. Don't feel shame. You were mistreated. You were a victim, and God does not want you to stay there in that. He wants you to overcome that. Naren, I want to ask you, we're just going to continue on. Normally we would take a break, but we're going to continue on there because there's just so much to cover. We really probably need like 3 or 4 shows, but we've got one right now. And so I want to ask you this question. How do women and some men become involved in this sex slavery initially? Because that's another question that I hear. Well, like, how does this happen? How do people get involved in this? And someone who knows more about that, just give us your take on that and what you know about it, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like for the traffickers, just like any mob, they all kind of recruit each other, who they can trust, just like the black market. But as far as the victims, a lot of the international victims, actually the way that they are brought in is they are, given promises, given, that they're able to get them in through the borders, and hopefully for a dream to immigrate. And so they think that, they're coming here for immigration purposes, and then they find themselves in a, sex trafficking ring. And then they immediately, kidnap them and drug them, and then they throw them in a room to be one of the sex trafficking victims. So quite a few, they're given promises and lied to, and many times the children as well. The children are kidnapped in other countries and brought into our borders, and they don't speak any English. They're just a child, and they're so terrified they can't even complain. And if they're a young girl, they'll try to raise them to a age they feel is appropriate to become a sex victim, very young. There are quite a few sick people out there who prefer much younger girls, as young as even 10 or 12. And so these are some of the types of victims as well. And, but a lot of times the women, even the minors, anywhere from like 14 to 17, they're from out of country, their parents, they're coming from extremely poor areas, and lied to and told that, they can live in the American dream, and then they are being sex trafficked. And then, of course, the ones within the country who become victims is many times, the majority of times actually, just by kidnappings and abductions in areas as we discussed before. So there's really 2 types of victims, some that were lied to and then they become victims themselves, and some that were just forced even from the beginning, and abducted and kidnapped.
Yeah. Thank you, Naren. Yeah. One of the things that I learned I was kind of blind to this early on, but as being a youth pastor early on in ministry, I was certainly I loved on my kids, very friendly, very But one of the things that I quickly learned through just local law enforcement and that are, I had to be careful because what you're mentioning, those are things to be key on, and as I've been involved in community and coaching sports, maybe there's some parents watching. You got to watch for that, those individuals who will single your kids out, maybe give them gifts individually and not collectively. Those are things to watch for, parents. If you're anywhere, as a coach, I made sure to never do that. Like if I was going to praise a group, my kids, I would give them all a treat. But those are some things. There are some things that you can watch for, and that's it. There are promises. I can remember. I didn't know it when I was a kid, but I remember this individual who lived a few blocks over. It was an older couple, and there was a gentleman. He had this awesome basement, and he had all these pinball machines and video games down there. And lo and behold, I found out in my early 20s that that man was a child molester, and he had trafficking issues, and he had, things had taken place, and it just like blew me away. Like, man, here is this guy, and now I know. I was always so mad at my parents that wouldn't let me go to this guy's house because he had all this cool stuff. And lo and behold, he was someone who was going after young boys, young girls, and so we have to be aware. We have to ask the hard questions, and if people won't answer them, for me, for my children, if people aren't going to let me in their house and have a conversation with them, if they're not going to let me ask the hard questions, if they're going to take an offense to them, then it is not somebody that my kids need to be around.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
And we need to be that staunch and that harsh on it. People need, if your integrity is going to stand the test of time. And it would blow me away as a youth pastor, the people that would drop their kids off at my house that I did not know and allow them to stay overnight at my house and never meet me. Just trust me as a youth pastor. I'm thankful and blessed, but it always caused me to be like, wow, I would always strive to go out and meet these parents, but there were parents that would just trust. And I'm not saying that we should not trust. Certainly we should, but we have to be aware because we see this more and more, and we see young men and women holding on to that until they're older and then not hearing about it, not finding out about it. I've seen individuals in my family as I've grown later on in life, them share about situations that they were in where they weren't trafficked per se, but they were taken advantage of in situations. And it's real and it's here. And that leads me to another question, Naren. What are some measures that elected officials can take regardless of political parties? That's not what we're talking about tonight. But what are some steps that they can take to fight against sex trafficking and slavery that you are aware of? That we need to say that us as individuals, we can take to our local politicians and say, hey, man, we want to see a change, and we want to see a change now and here, whatever state we're in, whatever number you are on the list, it doesn't matter. If you're on the list, you're a number. Whether you're 50, 15, or 1, it is happening, and it shouldn't. So what are some things that we can take to our state leaders and say, hey, let's make a change?
Absolutely. And that's a great question, Pastor Jason. And, the elected officials, so these candidates, that come out, and regardless of what party they're in, you have to look at what their policies are and what they're pushing forward. And if there is a official or a candidate who's running who doesn't talk about national security, who doesn't mention things like sex trafficking, which is huge in the United States, and speaking locally out of Michigan, but just in, it's in all 50 states. It's in over 161 countries. But, just looking at details that they speak about, that they promise to touch base on when they win. And if they don't mention, securing our borders and not allowing, enforcing police funding the police, not defunding the police. The police, the detectives, the police, a lot of time the detectives were police officers. And this is how a lot of times they're promoted to become detectives. And these detectives actually fish for sex traffickers, and they try to bust these rings of sex traffickers. There was a huge case actually just in Michigan alone that was busted just in the city of Warren. It was a house you would have never imagined. It was completely under the radar, and it was the city of Warren that busted that ring of sex traffickers. That was one of the biggest contributors of sex traffickers in Michigan. And that could have been really one of the biggest cases that brought us to number 10 from number 2. So these elected officials, you are enabling these people to take power of your life. You cannot vote for someone that doesn't care about what is valuable to you. Your family values, having your child and your young girls be safe, and your young boys, and just women in general, and not voting for anyone that is not speaking about pedophiles and that it's unacceptable. And, this is all very important topics. And these are things that are happening right now. They happen every day. They happen every hour of the day in all 50 states. And especially in our state, and so looking at this as a bipartisan cause, and just, really, really trying to vote and empower people who believe in our values, and protecting our country, protecting our national security, protecting our young girls. And if they don't show those highlights as their top topics, then forget about them. Don't put them in a chair that will not enforce any laws to protect our young girls, and not pay any attention, and not empower the police to further dig in and try to find more of these underground rings that are literally trading our girls right from underneath us, and right through the borders, and right back in, and all around us. And it's happening every day. And it's just slowly emerging to the top. And I'm so glad it is, because this is just heart-wrenching, even as a mother, just, a new mother, and just, I can't bear to feel the pain for these mothers that lose their young girls. Can you imagine getting a phone call and your girl has been abducted, and you'll never find her? Once these sex traffickers get a hold of these young girls, there's a very low percentage. Once they're traded, there's a very low percentage they will ever be found again. There was a report on an elected official. His young girl was kidnapped. And with that type of power, he was never able to get his girl again. She's gone forever. And so it's just, it's very frightening, very frightening.
Yeah, absolutely, Naren. I too challenge people. You can look at your elected officials, as she said, and see what they stand for, see what they brush off. Right now we have an individual who stands on the other side, who is potential to be a president, and he has cases against him where he has been involved with women that he should not have been, and the media is brushing it under the rug. And some of you might come back and say, well, yeah, we see that with President Trump too. But don't just listen to the media. Do the research, dig yourself, look into it, look at who you're voting for. Don't rely on the media to be the source of your information. Google is out there. It's a thing where it's been said millions of times, we are so heavily informed, but yet we're so dumb because we just rely on everything that everybody says, when we can do a search and really find out the answers. And yes, I can look and see that our current president has had cases come against him, 8 or 9 or so, but I see that 1 or 2 of them could be something that could be potential to stick, where the others are not. Where yet I see Google, I see Yahoo, or I see Google, I see YouTube removing things from their media to cover up current things that are going on with candidate Biden. And, the list goes on. It's not just him. And we do need to caution ourselves, see what we're voting for, who we're voting for, who we're allowing, those that are voting for, approving prostitution to be legalized, like that. What? We need to be aware of these things. As Naren mentioned, don't just sit back.
So demonic.
It is so demonic, and we just when they brush that stuff off and make jokes about it, that is a sickness. That is sickening. I watched some of what happened last week with the Democratic Party convention, and I've watched some of the Republican and whatever. Where I stand doesn't really matter. But when I watch some of them last week pinpoint and try to point things that the Republican side that they're not even taking a stand for or against, it just breaks my heart. It breaks my heart to see men and women that we elect to positions, but yet we don't look at what they're voting for or against and what they stand for. Again, they promise things, but yet their track record doesn't lead it there. We need to be aware. We need to expose this. And we need officials in local and higher levels, from local to the top, in positions, men and women who are surrounding themselves, whether they're men and women of Christ at the time or not, themselves with men and women of Christ that are standing against this sin and this evil, wicked way, and saying we're not gonna put up with this. We're not gonna stand for this. We're gonna make a change. We're gonna make things happen. And I am thankful for our local governments and our local officials that do. I know I've had the, I would say, fortunate but yet unfortunate opportunity to counsel men and women who have dealt with this in the police force, and they don't take this lightly. It wrecks their lives. It breaks them because they have to see this. They see what takes place, and they are broken because their hands are tied at some levels because of the men and women that are in government that are choosing to turn a blind eye to this stuff and focus on other areas and not this area. And it truly breaks my heart to see that, to see that take place. Brother Bashar, anything you want to add to that as we kind of wind down?
I got so much to say, but Pastor Jason, I'm telling you. So two pieces of advice. So a political solution and a church solution. So quickly for the church solution, parents just have to warn their children. It just comes to that. We need to protect our families. We need to let children know. I mean, just the other day, I was with some brothers and sisters, and one of my sisters, she's a mom, and she was telling her little daughter, like, hey, you need to stay around me. She goes, remember, if you don't stay around, somebody might take you. I'm like, wow. I was like, you tell her that? She goes, yeah, absolutely. I have to. I'm like, praise God. She's a little 4-year-old. She might not understand it, but at least she knows in her head, stay by mommy, stay by daddy. And that's what all parents in the body of Christ needs to do. Don't shelter your children from this. Let them know you can't be going around hugging everybody no more. This ain't the 20s or whatever when it was all right. You need to stay by your parents. And I mean, there's a lot of family members who abuse children too. So as parents, keep watch over your family, even your uncles, aunts, cousins, whoever. You don't know who has these inclinations, so don't risk it. Love your children enough to protect them. So that's the first thing this church needs to do, is protect their own household. Then they can help watch other people's children as well, make sure they're being protected too. So that's the church solution, obviously, for our communities to make sure we're protected from this evil. Obviously, praying for our children, making sure they're safe. So the political solution is, I mean, it's so hard because one, you have two anti-currents that are preventing things from actually happening. So you have the potential of normalization of pedophilia in our culture. So in the 70s, you had what's called NAMBLA, the North American Man-Boy Love Association, which was, even back then, they were trying to normalize it, and praise God, nobody fell for it back then. But now, just like you said, Pastor Jason, it's the academics now that are trying to normalize it with TED Talks, with let's give them a chance. And maybe we don't understand pedophilia. Maybe it is a sexual orientation. It's like, hold on. It's the academics that are going to secretly bring this in. So you have the current of the culture that is preventing this. Then you have the current of the justice system that is pervasively not doing enough to get this thing under wraps and solved. So you have the problem with child sex trafficking and possession of child pornography in the justice system currently is that depending on the age of the child being trafficked or the child's being depicted in pornography will dictate how the charges go. So the younger the children, the higher the charges. The older the children, the lesser the charges. And that is just a bunch of nonsense. It shouldn't matter how old or how young the child is. The point is, this is evil and needs to be addressed. Let's stop making exemptions and exceptions for these evil that's happening in our society. And if one thing that the whole Epstein case taught us is that when he first got charged in Florida, he was charged with soliciting child prostitutes. Now, I mean, I don't know if any of us are that stupid, but last time I checked, children don't prostitute themselves; they are trafficked. So the fact that he even got away with that back in Florida, and then how he was the most prolific child sex trafficker in our time, and then everybody brushed it under, nobody cared, everyone knew about his island, everybody knew about his planes, and just politicians, actors, all this, oh yeah, no, Epstein's cool, blah, blah, blah. So if Epstein showed us anything, is that the justice system has failed us and the culture is already moving in this direction. We need to take a hardline stance. And I know a lot of people, a lot of Christians, I love them dear to death, and they're against capital punishment, and I respect them. But as for this crime, we need to push for capital punishment. These people need to be hung, they need to be electrocuted, whatever needs to be shown, so that society can see with their own eyes, this is how we treat people who are that's depraved and do with this issue. So for this situation, it needs to be addressed politically on both ends and needs to be pushed. We need to tell legislators, listen, I don't care about your economics. I don't care about this. I don't care about Medicare. I don't care nothing. Are you going to promote capital punishment for pedophiles and child sex traffickers and child pornographer producers or not? And if you don't, I'm not voting for you. It's as simple as that. Our legislators, how about, I'll put abortion for the side right now. If you're going to push for capital punishment for pedophiles, I don't care what age, whatever, for child pornography producers, you push a capital punishment, I'll support you. And that needs to go, and honestly, online with the whole Save the Children hashtag, which gets censored by Facebook. Facebook will censor Save the Children, but won't actually get rid of child pornography. So, yeah, but blows my mind. But so, since actually both, I've talked to many liberals and many Republicans, they both agree, Save the Children. So if we can go to our legislators and say, we're not voting you unless you push capital punishment for this crime. And until we take a serious stance on this, it's going to continue, because I guarantee you, once traffickers see what we do to them for what they're doing with our justice system, I guarantee you they'll either start getting more underground, or they'll start having to do their business elsewhere. But unless we take a hardline stance, we're going to keep seeing this fluff. We're going to keep seeing cover-ups, and this issue is not going to be addressed. So
I completely agree. I think that, very well said, Brother Bashar, but I think that if we don't show, a strong stand against these types of severe, horrendous crimes that cannot be reversed, and we're lucky when they are reversed. I think it's just by chance that, we get lucky and we catch, a big ring, and because they're so good at what they do, they've been doing it for so long. But, like Brother Bashar, if we show a strong stand, if there is some sort of severe punishment for sex trafficking, for child, pornography, I mean, for these, going back to the elected officials, when will they care when it's their own child? It's our children that it's affecting. And yes, I agree. I think that everyone should be asking these candidates, how do you feel about pedophilia? It's a very open topic they need to be discussing with these officials, because you'd be surprised how many of them actually may be pedophiles themselves, maybe into some strange things. I mean, Brother Bashar mentioned numerous times, they think it's normal. They're in their sick mind. There's a lot of powerful people in this country that think it's perfectly normal. And actually, in many countries internationally, they prefer children even over women. And this is disgusting. And we don't want it to come here. We don't want it to be the norm in the United States. We need to stand strong against it. And yes, I believe if there is capital punishment for something like that, darn right, that would be nipped in the butt just like that.
Amen.
Absolutely.
Amen.
I think it comes back to what I've heard from other countries. You steal one time, you get a warning. The second time you steal, the hand that you stole with, they cut it off.
Mm-hmm.
You steal with the other hand, then they cut that one off. Then what's that leave you with? You don't steal anymore. I know. Again, there may be even people in my own congregation who would say, "Man, you're harsh," and I don't agree with you. But you're right. You have to cut it off. If I tell my son, "Don't run across the road," don't run across the road. When I went out there and my hand met his blessed assurances on the back end, and I swatted him on the tail for running across the road, he stopped running across the road. Mm-hmm. And we do that for safety and protection. But you're right. If a candidate cannot answer this and they brush it off, we need to ask deeper questions, because I was told as a 5th grader, ask more questions. I was told to test it against a theory, to test it, to act, that they're telling me quiet. So for me, my challenge is to individuals, church or not, push them, challenge them. You're going to elect them to a position of leadership. They need to give you an answer. Not, well, I guess this or that. They need to know what they stand for and what they stand against, and stand firm on that. If they are for pedophilia, then they need to stand up for it. If they don't think it's wrong, if they don't think,
and they need to ask them. Pastor Jason, very good question. And they need to ask them publicly, because you'd be surprised when you ask someone something privately, and let's say you're at one of their fundraisings or one of their events, put them on the spot where they're on camera and ask them publicly. And that's how I've caught a lot of lying elected officials and a lot of candidates, when you ask them and you put them on the spot, and that's when they give you the true answer, because they're on camera and their actual real supporters are watching them and making sure they're monitoring their every move. And just to piggyback also on, elected officials brushing it off, but the parents that are brushing off this topic and thinking, it's never going to happen to them. Do your kids go to school? Do your kids go to public schools? Do your kids ever walk home? Do you have a daughter? Do you have a son? A brother, a sister? These are all possible victims. God forbid, I would never wish it on my worst enemy, but it's all very likely to happen. Never think it would never happen to you. And that's a scary thought that, people need to start taking this serious. And we really don't want any of the states in the United States, to be on an international sex trafficking hot list. It's a terrible thing.
Exactly.
And no parents should brush this topic off, because it can happen to anyone. It's happened to elected officials that are extremely powerful, extremely rich, and they weren't even able to get their daughter back. So what makes you think that you're not a possible, can be a possible victim? Anybody can be.
Yep. Absolutely.
Amen.
Absolutely. And I've just, unfortunately, what you said, I've seen it. I can remember a situation last year. I went to a garage sale, and there was a gentleman who I asked him if he had Sports Illustrated magazines, because that's something that I collect. And he said, no, I have Playboys. And then I said, "No, I'm not really into that thing." And he went on to proceed to tell me that he was a school teacher. And that triggered me. And I pulled away, and I went back around the roundabout, and I went up to that man and I said, "I'm going to say this to you because God told me to say it. You have something in your life that you need to correct, or you need to step out of the position that you're in."
Exactly.
And that was a boldness from God. And I knew that I needed to go back and tell that man that, because it got me thinking, if he just thinks that's okay, it can lead to, and okay, maybe it won't lead to anything more for him. But there are men, and there are even now, we're seeing women that struggle with this. It starts small. Sin starts small. It starts with a little thing, and then it gets bigger and bigger. And as you said, it gets this big where the educational system is now pumping it into us that it is okay for this to take place. I can remember a missionary that I spoke with several years ago, and he said, "America is in trouble." And I said, "Why do you say that?" And he said this to me. This was 5 years ago. He said, "In the next 10 to 15 years, you're going to see so much sin exposed around these sexual acts, and they're going to begin to legalize in your country this stuff taking place, down to the point where it's okay for individuals to have sex with animals, and it's okay."
Wow.
And
That's so demonic.
And what is happening in our country?
Very prophetic.
People are laughing about this. "Oh, it's no big deal. They just struggle with this. They grab a Playboy here and there." That is demonic. It is.
And brothers, you know what some mothers actually do? Even within the community, they'll actually base their home purchase based on how many sex offenders are in the area. So they say, "Oh, I'm safe." There's like maybe a couple. But what they're not understanding, these sex offenders who support and empower sex trafficking because they are funding it, and they're the purchasers of this type of behavior. But what they're not understanding is that the really good ones, the expert sex offenders, the ones that have never been caught, they're not going to be on that list, and they're probably never going to be on the list.
Exactly.
Because they're always moving. They're way under the radar. So that, our computers and our little research of trying to find them on our computer is not going to help you. It's just to be cautious and really building our village together to make sure it's a powerful nest, that it's protected, instead of just, allowing everyone to come in and go in as they please, and not knowing how many sex offenders and how many sex traffickers and how many of our young girls are going right through from underneath us.
Absolutely.
Amen.
Absolutely.
Amen.
Naren, I want to ask this one last question, because I think it's crucial and it's very important. Where or who should someone contact if they believe that they've found suspicious activity of sex trafficking? Where are some places that they can go, and what are some contacts that they can make?
Absolutely. And if they don't get these numbers, I would just dial 911, and they'll probably put you in contact with a detective or someone that's already working on the sex trafficking in that particular region that you are, or area that you are reporting on. But first, I would like to highlight, please do not approach the suspected criminal that you may think is a sex trafficker, because you may be endangering your life. Many times they're armed, they're dangerous, and they operate in a pack. They're not operating as a single person, as a single unit. But their number, the actual hotline, is the 888-373-7888. Again, that's 888-373-7888. That is a sex trafficking hotline. They can also call the Department of Homeland Security, since this is a national security crisis, and that's 866-DHS-2, and then ICE for ICE. And if they feel more comfortable texting, actually a lot of sex trafficking suspicious cases are texted to the feds, and that number they can actually text is 233-733. So if they send a text message for regarding the suspicious case that they have possibly found, send it to 233-733 so you can text that right into your phone. You would need, the area, if you have an address, if you have a name, and it never hurts to report it and let the feds do their job and do the investigation, and and never endanger your own life by encountering one of the sex traffickers.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Naren. Thank you, Brother Bashar. We are over and out of time, and so we just thank you all for being with us. We hope that you have a blessed night. I hope to have you guys back on soon, and we can continue this discussion and go deeper. But thank you so much for what you've shared with us tonight. We just again thank you all for joining us. Thank you for your support to ABN and the Trinity Channel. Have a blessed night. Go out there and live love so that others can live loved. We will see you again soon. Good night.
Good night.